Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to people in other time zones. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities Team, and welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit. It's great to be with you. I'm going to be interviewing a very special guest today, Dr. Kurt Johnson. Kurt is a well-known internationally as a scientist, comparative religionist, social activist, Huffington Post blogger, and former monastic. He is the author of over 200 professional articles and books, including The Coming Interspiritual Age. I know you're going to enjoy this program. I'll be introducing Kurt shortly. We also have a special guest. I'll bring him in a little bit. I think you'll be excited to meet him as well. We have about 20,000 registered for today's call. Some cannot listen in live, so we send out a recorded link so these people can listen in later. Thank you so much, everyone, for prioritizing time to be here for this important conversation. As always, this call is interactive with each of you, our listeners, so I invite you to put your questions in the question window in Instant Teleseminar. I promise we'll get to at least a few of your questions during the hour, and you might go ahead and put comments and questions in the window now if you like the idea. A little about Humanities Team as we get started. In Humanities Team we see there is only one presence, the divine, and see we are all offspring and expressions of the divine. This means God's love, light, grace, and peace are ours because there is no separation, and we share the same essence. We don't share this as something academic or intellectual. We believe everyone and everything is a beautiful and sacred face of the divine. Since our founding in 2003, we've done our best to live as one with the divine, each other, and our earth home. We don't need to be perfect. It doesn't have to feel heavy. We must only do our best. When we talk about oneness with the divine, of course, this is true for all of life, not just humanity. This has repercussions for how we see ourselves, others, and the earth that is our home. This means everyone and everything is sacred and should be treated as such. It also means we're responsible for the world around us because, in truth, it's part of our authentic self, encompassing the whole of the earth. Perhaps there's nothing more important than this, coming to see ourselves as a cell in the body of the divine, the earth, and stepping into a role where we're caring for the earth and the world that we live in. This is important and urgent work. We are advocating personal development that crosses over into all of our roles, including that of partner, parent, and community citizen, but also institutional change so we live as one collectively and create a fulfilling, compassionate, and sustainable world. If you resonate with our work, we invite you to go to humanitiesteam.org, our website, and reach out to us about projects you'd like to become involved in. We would love to hear from you. Okay, please get comfortable as we begin our program. I'm now going to introduce our special guest. Kurt Johnson is well-known internationally as a scientist, comparative religionist, social activist, and former monastic with a PhD in evolution, ecology, systematics, and comparative biology, plus extensive training in comparative religion and philosophy. He was associated professionally for 20 years with the American Museum of National History and also the One Spirit Interfaith Seminary in New York City. Ordained in 3 spiritual traditions, he is widely regarded as the closest associate of Brother Wayne Teasdale, the founder of the modern interspiritual movement, and works also with the International Contemplative Alliance and Father Thomas Keating, founder of the Centering Prayer movement. In science, Dr. Johnson has published over 200 professional articles and 7 books on evolution and ecology. His popular book, Nabokov's Blues, The Scientific Odyssey of a Literary Genius, co-authored with New York Times journalist Steve Coates, was a 10 best book in science in 2000 at Booklist, Library Journal, The Washington Post, HMS Beagle, and Editor's Choice for 1999 at the Seattle Times. He is also the author with David Robert Ord of The Coming Interspiritual Age. Johnson and Brother Wayne Teasdale co-founded the International Interspiritual Dialogue Association in 2002, which presented at the 2004 Parliament of the World's Religions. And welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit. Kurt, it's great to have you with us.
Oh, great, Steve. It's nice to be back and talking to you again just a few days from having had a long sit-down with you in Boulder.
Yeah, what a synchronicity. Gosh, because we didn't really, or I wasn't putting these two things together when we planned this meeting here, this global conference call on Thursday, which immediately follows that amazing program that you put together on Sunday. We're going to get to that actually in just a minute, but let me go ahead and lead us into it. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about the program as I lead us in. We both participated in this program Sunday that you organized here in Colorado, themed around altruism, and you created panels in New York City. Of course, before this, the focus was a book by David Sloan Wilson called Does Altruism Exist? Culture, Genes, and the Welfare of Others. I'd really like to talk about this. We had an exciting conversation during the program that I was part of. Of course, you moderated it with Yanni. During the program, you shared that we are dealing here not just with a book, but with a paradigm shift in evolutionary biology itself, which is huge. Can you talk a little bit about this, Kurt?
Yeah, absolutely. In a nutshell, what's happened is, as evolutionary biology has been able to mine, more and more elaborate data sets, what it's discovered is that at the level of groups and the level of what's called group selection and multi-level selection, just systems of complexity, that natural selection, the very process in evolution itself, does not select for self-interest and survival of the fittest. It actually selects for structures and processes that serve the whole, which is actually what altruism is. Now, this is a revolution because everybody on this call knows from looking at politics and economics and business that ever since the Darwinian period and after the origin of species, there was a hijacking to everything is about competition, it's about survival of the fittest, it's about who's the strongest, it's about exploitation. And suddenly, now, the data unequivocally shows that at these higher levels of organization, certainly true of sentient beings and cultures, actually natural selection selects for altruism. And what's important about David Sloan Wilson's book is that it's the first in a series by Yale University and Templeton called The Foundational Questions of Science. And what could be a more foundational question than the question of, does evolution favor selfishness and self-interest, or does evolution actually favor altruism and service of the whole? So this announcement that the paradigm has shifted, it obviously implies that everything that's been going the wrong direction in economics, in religion, in social governance, and all these arenas is what's created. And I'll just be brief on this so I don't go on more, but what David Wilson calls dystopia, that all we have to do is look around and see we don't have utopia, we have dystopia. Whereas nature has utopia, it has balance, it has organismic systems that serve each other, because it has always known that it's selective, in its own patterns toward that altruism. So this is the beginning of a gigantic sea change, particularly because it joins sacred activists and social activists with the same vision and the same overall goals, which at the UN they basically say the world that would work for everyone. Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's also important. I think almost everybody on this call has heard of E.O. Wilson, Edward Wilson at Harvard, the founder of sociobiology, and he and David Wilson have also then just written a reformulation of sociobiology, in other words, how organisms live and work together based on this understanding now that group selection and multi-level selection select for altruism. So this is not just a cul-de-sac that we're having a conversation about from the spiritual side. It's actually an engagement by the whole spiritual community in the fact that secular science has now changed its mind on this matter of survival of the fittest and self-interest. So it just opens up so many doors, like I said, between the spiritual narrative about moving forward toward the world we'd like to see and the secular narrative of moving toward the world that we'd like to see. And that in the world of the heart, where everybody can look at that level of urgency and the world that we would like to see change from all the messes we have today to a different possible world, it actually means that we can be in lockstep with people that have a very different worldview or narrative than we do, which, again, there's a term for that now internationally called narrative pluralism or the trans-narrative, which basically says that it doesn't matter what your worldview is. It matters how we behave, what we build together, how we cooperate. And in David Sloan Wilson's lingo, which is really from the scientific side, what we in spirituality would call interfaith or interspirituality, that sense of the oneness, the overlying unity, which has been your theme in your recent initiative, this actually now in the new science is called equivalence. So they've come up with another word because it's more comfortable for them. But what they're basically saying with equivalence is that in this urgent time, all worldviews are welcome at the table to talk about how we go forward together with regard to ethics, values, vision, and ideals. And, of course, I know most of the readers will say, well, that's what the Dalai Lama has been writing about for 20 years, and that's exactly correct. In Beyond Religion, the Dalai Lama said that this road that we can walk down together is really the road of shared ethics, values, morals, and the vision for the future that could serve us all. So this is a major convergent point, which is very, very exciting.
Yes, it is. Let me read one of your quotes here. I love this because this again just brings through the landmark moment that it is. You said, when I first completed a detailed reading and markup of Does Altruism Exist? From both my professional biological and comparative religion backgrounds, I said to myself, finally, after decades of sacred activists and social progressives feeling their social idealism was doomed to be an upstream battle against a hostile, unkind, and even cruel evolutionary process, here is a view of evolution claiming to be the new mainstream that paints a very different picture, one of the evolutionary process preferring structures that serve the well-being of the whole and not just the desires of this or that powerful individual or self-interest group. That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Which is awesome. So yes, I'm going to read that book back here again for people that are inclined to reading scientific type material, or rigorous material. The book is called Does Altruism Exist? Culture, Genes, and the Welfare of Others. This is a landmark book. It's getting a lot of attention, and it gives the support and backing to this thesis, this narrative that we do. Our biology actually is supporting altruism, is supporting good works, and this whole Darwinian survival of the fittest thing, wasn't really true. I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to, I guess, huh, Kurt?
Yeah, it was not really true. It was a partial understanding, and it was also hugely hijacked by the economic and political establishment of that time of the Industrial Revolution, which was really a very Shark Tank time. When Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, it was just the beginning of that incredibly Shark Tank kind of environment. Now, another resource that the listeners can go to that will simplify all this is if they go to www.forum21.co, not .com, but forum21.co, they're going to see links to the altruism discussion where there's a summary of David Sloan Wilson's book, chapter by chapter, with just a short paragraph for each chapter that in layman's terms really explains what the hard science means. And then there's also an hour and 45-minute video by Ken Wilber that was shot last July at a discussion which Ken Wilber and David Sloan Wilson both attended in Denver, which was our program last year. And that they'll note at YouTube has over 40,000 views now. And it's, again, Ken Wilber elaborating not only what this paradigm shift means, but even more importantly, where the world religions are at right now on a global level with regard to moving forward toward a healthy globalization and a healthy multicultural civilization. So those resources are maybe much more accessible than the book itself. So I thought I should probably mention that.
Yeah, fabulous. And, gosh, Ken Wilber is in Humanities Team, he's our Spiritual Leadership Award winner this year. We're actually a week from tomorrow going over to present him with the award. And he, of course, his Aquil framework and Holon model and so many of the things that he's doing are just so cornerstone, really, to all of the work that we're collectively doing. Just a great, great leader. And I love that one of his messages that he's sharing now is he believes in this next decade that we're going to probably get to this 10% critical mass where we hit tipping point. He says we're at 5% now, and that we are. This is building. There's more through books like this, David Sloan Wilson's book, and just through Kurt, your work, other people, Humanities Team's work, other people's work, that this is surfacing that. My God, we really are all one, and we can create this world that we've always wanted for ourselves and our kids and future generations. Let me go ahead and just introduce our special, our surprise guest here. We have on the line with us also Yanni Maniates. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Yanni. And Yanni's just such a also wonderful person and leader in this whole area. He was a moderator with Kurt during this program that took place on Sunday here in Boulder. And Yanni, do you want to actually let me just say a word about you before you share, and then maybe we can all talk a little bit about Sunday's program. So Yanni has been teaching meditation, intuitive developments, healing, and metaphysical subjects for over 20 years. As well, he's been doing intuitive counseling for the past 15 years. He's certified in numerous holistic modalities and has studied and practiced many esoteric healing modalities. The primary focus of Yanni's work is to help people experience what he calls still small voice within, or as he calls it, the embrace, for it is, he says. And so true, huh, Yanni?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I found myself in the middle of all this. One day I just plopped into that embrace, and from there experienced that oneness that you speak of, and from there just knew that that led me on a whole different path in terms of how I saw myself and how I related to other people, and how it is about us being one and serving each other, which kind of segues into, if you want me to keep talking here, into what our work is all about. And, not only are we trying to just reach thought leaders with regard to this, but we want to kind of trickle this down to every person, to every woman, to every man. And because as I've gone through my life and met many, many, many people, and in my classes, say to people, as Albert Einstein asked, do you think this is a friendly universe or not? That's the most important question you can ask yourself. Is this a friendly universe or not? And when you just question people a bit, they really don't think it is. They think it's a hostile environment. Survival of the fittest is the way it goes, is the paradigm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I kind of bumped into all this stuff, when I re-met up with Kurt again a couple of years ago, I'd known him quite well in the 80s, organizing interfaith conferences with him. I went, wow, this is really huge, and how can we get this word out, so to speak, this new vision out? How can we help people realize that this is not a dog-eat-dog world, that this is, in fact, a world that goes forward, that evolutionarily and just personally goes forward when we work together with each other. So some of the things that we're doing, this video program that we had last Saturday where you were involved, other ones we've done, other ones we're planning, all kinds of other things we're planning and writing. I won't go into those details unless you want them. The whole point of all that is to trickle, to get this out to everyone, to get everyone to realize that they can kind of tap into a whole new vision and that they can feel a part of rather than separate from their lives, other people's lives, the world, and that on the macro level they're connected and on the micro level they're connected. So again, and you can tell me to stop at any point here, one of the reasons we're doing these videos and these programs is to put it out in the communities, to get people involved. Even locally where I am, we have an initiative where we're going to show these videos, have our own panels, and have local people just reacting to all this and just, catching on fire. And then finding ways in a micro level or a macro level, whatever they can do to kind of continue to push this forward. So for myself, it's really inspiring just to see this new paradigm, this new understanding kind of beginning to take hold. And certainly with your work and your vast network and other networks that, I've come to see exist, wow, we can really get this out there. And this other narrative that we're seeing that is reported in the news media that seems to be the dominant one, or at least initially it is now, that's really in its death throes, and that something new is really on its way. So anyhow.
Yeah, perfect. Well, let's and Yanni, it was such a pleasure to. I met Yanni for the first time and Kurt in person on Sunday during this program that they created here in Boulder, or just outside of Boulder. It was actually on Gold Hill. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that because I'm not sure our listeners are familiar with the panels you've created that started with papers that we all wrote. You had, I think, 3 different panels, and the first 2 you convened meetings in New York City, I think, to bring those people together and to have dialogue. You videotaped it, and then you did the same thing just this past Sunday in Boulder. Kurt and Yanni, can you all talk a little bit about that? What exactly did you create here, and what was its purpose? And Yanni, you talked a little bit about this, so we'll go a little deeper here.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting that this particular round of what's erupted, actually began. David Sloan Wilson read my book, The Coming Interspiritual Age, and he said he had what was called the 2 + 2 = 4 moment. That the interspiritual movement, of course, is about the equivalence of all the narratives, all the stories, practices, and wisdom resources of all the world's religions being one gigantic shared resource for moving forward in a healthy globalization and a healthy multiculturalism, as opposed to a catastrophic, war-ridden, conflict-ridden movement into that era. And he realized, oh my God, there's no difference between the vision of interspirituality and altruistic evolution. And in fact, if altruistic evolution was true, the interfaith and interspiritual movements, and then, of course, everything that you're doing with that and others are doing with that, actually just simply reflects where evolution would be going. So he called me up and he said, we really need to put together, the secular juice and the sacred juice that's really behind this understanding of this being such an opportunity. So what we realized, and I know you saw this at the panel in Boulder, is that this news lands on very different fertile ground, whether one's involved in governance or social justice or environment or whatever one's transformational passion is. This new news lands with a big impact. So our goal was a tremendous diversity of the people that we would ask, and it's over 50 people, 50 major thought leaders, including Corinna Gore and her father, who won the Nobel Prize, of course. We had a meeting with them at Union Theological Seminary. Just the question that we asked everyone initially, which you were also asked on Sunday, was how do you see the implications of this shift in science in your area of service and your area of passion? And, of course, that's incredibly diverse, whether one's working in feminism or one's working in grassroots social justice or climate change, whatever it would be. So that's really been the goal, is that the diversity of understanding the impact of this sea change and this ability for secular and sacred to really then be on the same path. One of the results of that, people may want to check out a website called Evonomics, evonomics.com. And that actually was founded by a young economist who's worked with David Sloan Wilson and Elinor Ostrom. Now, let me just mention really, really briefly. Elinor Ostrom was a Nobel Prize winner in economics in 2009. And she was awarded the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that holistic systems, or in other words, systems of people working together, can be completely self-sustaining without any element exploiting another, as long as certain design principles are in place. Now, as David pointed out, since the business community and economics has been going the other direction towards selfishness, they were smart enough to give her the Nobel Prize, but no one really looked into how these principles would look in real time. But now that the paradigm shift has arrived, those principles become, very, very important. So, long story short, a fellow named Robert Kadar, who's an economist and a young economist, started evonomics.com, and it right now is one of the hottest websites globally on economic shift. It gets nearly 150,000 hits a week. And so that kind of shows again how this is on fire. So that really is an answer to your question. We've done these things with tremendous gender diversity, background diversity, passion diversity, and then as Yanni said, creating these products and giving them back to all of those constituencies and saying, take this and do what you want to do with it, what really works for you in the discussions that you're a part of. So the hope is that then just, as has already happened in our meeting you, being on this call, simply multiplies and expands that discussion and that energy. I was going to say one more little postscript, and that is when you were giving your introduction and talking about what Humanities Team does and what its vision is, it was just absolutely synonymous with our two monikers. We have really two monikers. One comes from Ken Wilber. It's Waking Up and Growing Up, which basically means to take the world of spiritual practice and what we learn in the world of heart and awakened consciousness, and then combine that with the growing up, which is the question of how do we build the world that reflects that. And so then when you were talking about Humanities Team's interest in connecting that world of the heart and spiritual knowing with the world of doing and earth care, well, our entire program, which of course is actually the program you attended on Sunday, is from self-care to earth care. So all of this is quite in, to use David Sloan Wilson's term, in lockstep, and that's just really exciting.
Yeah, you can really feel the divine's hand in all of this, can't you? Because these things, there's so many of these synchronicities that are coming together that are bringing us and our work together. We're all pointed in exactly the same direction, but there's this wonderful diversity where you're doing these blogging, writing articles, books, et cetera, putting a focus on this altruism activity, and then Humanities Team with what it's doing, and all of these other thought leaders and organizations all over the world that are coming in and being involved also. The Boulder group that I was a part of had just a terrific group of people participating, Steve McIntosh, Woody Vaspra, Mark Barash, John Latham, Karuna, Richard, I don't have Richard's last name, Mel
Oxley. Yeah, Richard Oxley.
Richard Oxley, thank you. Carolyn Ashley. So, in fact, we've got pictures on our Humanities Team website of the group that assembled in Boulder. It was awesome. I mean, you had these two meetings in New York City that included some of these people you were just talking about, Kurt, and then this meeting that I participated in Sunday with this rich diversity because, I was coming with Woody from a deeply spiritual place, But others, we had this physicist, this person is part of NOAA, then Steve McIntosh bringing in the integral view, Mark Barash, who wrote A Compassionate World, incredible diversity. We were essentially saying the same thing, but coming from a different place.
Yeah, and one of the real essential points here, and Yanni might want to comment on it more, is that we always have a component of spiritual practice, because this waking up component, which is, whether it's coming from indigenous wisdom or from, let's say, the Kundalini yoga background that Karuna brings to it, or whether it's Dzogchen or whether it's Sufism, there are all of these internal modalities or these spiritual technologies which are there to empower the individual to step into this building process and the growing up. So we never separate anymore this world of discussing where we're going with building new structures and new forms and new ways of being in the world from the bottom line of spiritual practice, your own understanding of awakening, your own understanding of the urgency of the heart. And as Wilbur points out, that's really a yin and a yang. We actually have a yin-yang symbol with waking up on the left and growing up on the right. And as Ken Wilbur points out, the rules in those two worlds are very different. In growing up, sure, yes, the mind, technology, all of our mental capabilities, why we're higher primates and have all the abilities we have that other animals don't have. But over on the left side in the waking up, the rules are literally jump in the water, come out the other side. How does that feel for you? And that's why we feel very free to use almost any truly authentic spiritual practice as a part of our waking up component. We tend to use Kundalini Yoga simply because, those are people who showed up, but also because it's extremely balanced. It has an extremely balanced understanding of spirit and body and the mystical and the applied. So that's just another aspect. Yanni, do you have something you'd like to say about that balance?
Yeah. Well, the thing that really inspires me about the events that we did, and again, to be clear for the audience, we did 3 video panels in New York City on April 12th, where we had 6 thought leaders in each of the panels. Actually, I think it was one of them had 7, but whatever. And what was really amazing to see, just as the diversity you experienced, Steve, at our event in Boulder, each of those panels had a very diverse group of people, individuals on each of the panels, and then add it all up, it was amazing diversity. But and basically all the people who were on the panels observed the panels that they weren't on. So it was a full-day event for everyone. And what happened there was way more than the sum of the parts. One, we saw the equivalency, to use the term that Kurt brought up earlier, but the commonality, that we all shared. But beyond that, it's like that one day when 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom came together, and voila, now no longer do we have that, we now have water. Oh my God, that was amazing. It was the same kind of feeling that happened, and I think that's what you would have experienced, that we did experience in Boulder last Sunday, that as we do this, as we allow ourselves to have these conversations, we all get, filled with a vision. And then that vision is something then that has this, growing up and getting out there and doing something about it. So what's inspiring about all these things, and again, we're going to get this media out, we're going to get these videos out. We've only just done them. We're in the process of editing and getting them out to people, and we'll share them with you, of course, and with anyone who wants to use them. We have written material that does the same thing for people who want to read, and we've only got a little bit of that out, but we have more that's coming out. We know that as you sit here with this material, something else happens. And as you begin to share it with others, something happens. And then there's this wave of momentum. So just as we don't want to let go of what happened last Sunday, and before this call we were, brainstorming about what can we do next, what can we do next, what can we do next. This is what's so exciting about all this, because we are riding that evolutionary wave. This isn't, any individual, it is us. and the us is moving through us, and what we're going to create is something way more than we can even imagine now. Because when a little hydrogen, a little oxygen came together, they had no idea what they were creating. And so I don't even, we don't, but on some level we do. So that's what's so exciting about this.
Yeah, and one other aspect that's important here too, because it's so in step with what Humanity's Team is about as a global network, and that is that one thing that gives this whole network traction, and that by network I mean you, us, everyone who's having this discussion, is our positioning at the United Nations. I think everybody knows that the UN, as of about 2 years ago, adopted 176 nations signed on what were called the Millennial Development Goals, or the Sustainable Development Goals for the millennium, and also a way to network everyone together globally to push the civil will, to create the political will for real change. And that part of it is called the Platform for the Emergence of the Culture of Peace. Now, what's interesting is that there's an awful lot of people in our network, myself included, who we've stayed in New York even after retirement because the work at the UN pushing this forward globally and on that global campus over there on First Avenue and about 4 blocks between 40th and 44th Street is just an absolute crucible for how fast this ignition can work. And I know you've gotten that spirit from knowing Ambassador Chowdhury and the others that work with Erwin Laszlo and others who work with you at Humanity's Team. So many of us sit on committees, and it's interesting myself in the sense of growing up, that part for me is the Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns, which is really about the doing. But on the waking up side, I sit on the Committee for International Yoga Day. And one of the reasons that we've been so engaged with yoga people like Karuna, who was our host, and people can take a look at her work at lightonkundalini.com, is that, for instance, the Yoga Day Committee hosted a meeting about how yoga itself is universal in the sense of wellness, and it's also universal in the sense of empowerment. And that was an amazing meeting because people from all over the world were talking about, well, yeah, there's at least 22 different kinds of yoga. But when people understand the wellness and empower capability of embodied spirituality, it actually is filling huge cultural voids, particularly in the third world, so that across the third world there's this incredible amount of work that's been done for women and for children and for education and for poverty through yoga communities. And people will be interested to know that actually the International Yoga Day is only a year old, but the reason that it was actually declared by the UN, even though it would have seemed odd that it would seem to be pointing toward something that's religious, which is very unusual for the UN, is simply because it serves. And I think, the central message from Humanity's Team and our network and all the people that we're lucky to work with is this real desire to serve what you just said earlier, Steve, is this advancing sense of how we could actually, really make change at a global level.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Let me bring in some questions from listeners because we've got a couple here. One is from Donald. He's a physician in Hartford, and he says, experts tell us we have little time to get our act together. Can you offer a practical plan to go forward? Kurt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right, and we are totally realistic about this. At the UN, we use the term the soft landing and the hard landing, and it really is very simple. One way or the other, we're going to become a global civilization and a multicultural civilization, but it can happen the easier way or it can happen the harder way. We're hoping that this gigantic educational work that we're all doing and spiritual practice work might be the way toward the soft landing, but we're not naive. The hard landing, if there was a global catastrophe and then we had to claw our way back simply because after such a beating we might wise up. He's very right. The timing on that is really around 2050. And the reason for that is that when you look at all the data, and this is really from UNESCO and Noah and everybody else, is that if we don't address issues like climate change, resource scarcity, sharing of resources, water, and we solve the social problems that lead to regionalized and local conflict, which are everywhere now, we're going to reach a point around 2050 where the carrying capacity, and by that it means how many people the world can support, will drop from 9 billion to 2 billion. That would actually mean that 7 billion people would have to perish. And this is a very, very frightening scenario. So we're not naive about that. In fact, one thing that evolution says, you know the cliche, necessity is the mother of invention. Very often it's these very bottlenecks where time is of the essence and things are unbelievably urgent that actually push people to step forward. Now, we've seen that at the UN. I think what caused 176 nations to sign on to the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals was that sense of urgency, and it was actually expressed in this term that business as usual is not an option. So in the interest of more questions, I'll cut it at that, but he's absolutely right in that observation. Time is of the essence.
Yeah, boy, that's a thoughtful response. Thank you, Kurt. Yeah, soft landing and hard landing, and of course, this is where we all come in. We've all got to be involved to create that soft landing, and I know this community is a community of activists where we are involved. The next question is from Penny in Oregon. She says, when you gather all of these different leaders together, I appreciate the synergy and energy that is formed. But did something emerge as an underlying or overarching goal or plan on how we move forward in addressing the issues we are facing in the world within this community and in collaboration?
Yeah, and the answer to that's a big yes, because the first thing that we do is we have follow-up meetings that ask everybody how we go, to use Wilbur's terms, from a state, which is just an experience and a discussion, to a platform, a structure, and new activities that actually make this more real in real time, locally and regionally. So we're very aware that we can't be just about events and discussions. We have to go to that second question. A good example, which I think your reader will be familiar with, is the Arab Spring. People demonstrated and they got some shifts, but they did not hang around to take the time to build the new structures that would replace the old structures, and very often they got just a new version of the old oppression. So we tell everybody, and we're very aware, and this is why it's so wonderful to have this discussion with you, Steve, and also with Humanity's team. If we don't really ask that question about how we move toward vision to new supportive structures, then we're kind of like just whistling Dixie. So that's a very good question.
Yeah, let me bring in, too, during our program in Boulder, we had a great discussion about conscious business. Mark Barash started talking a little bit about his Green World Ventures, where they're out planting around the planet, and I shared then of this Humanities Team initiative. We're actually involved with 3 other NGOs, the Club of Budapest, the Goy Peace Foundation, the Fowler Center for Business out of Case Western Reserve University, and, of course, ourselves, Humanities Team. And back early last year, we worked with these other 3 initiators to create this Conscious Business Declaration. You can find it, by the way, at consciousbusinessdeclaration.org. You could even go and take a look there now if you wanted. But what we could see working together with these other NGOs is that this work where we talk about unity and oneness, that if we don't bring this basis of unity and oneness into business, that we aren't going to go very far. At a personal development level, if it's just us and our families and our parenting that's involved, we'll go only so far. But with business, if we base business around this paradigm of oneness, then we can create just healthy businesses in our communities. Businesses can become generators of good things, as most are, or at least many are. But as we know, many businesses are generators of things that aren't healthy, that aren't good, that are creating dysfunction in the financial services sector. If you've seen The Big Short, it certainly talks about that. In the energy sector, we see this in agriculture and farming and fishing and foresting, etc. we can see dysfunction as well. This Conscious Business Declaration, the first principle in it is that we are one with humanity and all of life. Business and all institutions of the human community are integral parts of a single reality, interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. And, of course, this means that business doesn't operate in silos. It is interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent with everything on the planet as well. So that then leads into the second principle in line with this reality. The purpose of business is to increase economic prosperity while contributing to a healthy environment and improving human well-being. So we had a really good discussion about that and how this focus on conscious business, which is broad-based. This venture that I talked about is one of the things that is common to our work. Steve McIntosh is also involved in conscious business, and other people that were participating are as well. So we agreed this is maybe part of this evolutionary tornado that's coming in, that maybe the time has come for business to step into adjustments that start with the reality of the ultimate, that the reality of oneness, that everything is interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. And, of course, that wisdom has been around forever. So certainly it's time to live that collectively, but also in business. So Penny, I want to bring that in, too, that I think conscious business was, at least with the Boulder group, seen as something that we really need to get serious about. And Kurt and Yanni, you might want to say more about that, too.
Let me say one thing, and then I want to have Yanni make a comment, is that, Ken Wilber really builds a very interesting understanding of what's happening here when he distinguishes the emerging second-tier consciousness, which is this holistic consciousness that we're all talking about, from the old first-tier consciousness, which, let's say, would be Putin and Trump and everything that's about separation and beating up on each other and exploiting and competing, and that at a global level, the second-tier consciousness is bubbling up as a part of the evolutionary process if you're an evolutionist, or as a part of the spiritual unfolding if you're a spiritual person, just different narrative around that. But basically saying, very much like you said, that there will be bridge builders, there will be what some traditions call seed people, S-E-E-D, who will actually be the first ones to realize that a paradigm shift is coming and what it means to champion it in their own area of activity. So all the people in the business community, and one thing I'll be doing is connecting you directly with Robert Kadar at Evonomics, is that these are all the people who are seeing first where this has to go, and then the urgency of it all really urges them to step into leadership of where that particular part of the stream will go. I'll just say one more thing, that one of the speakers at the Parliament of World Religions, who was a major business figure from technology, and we had been a part of a conference in Silicon Valley on consciousness and technology, and basically made the observation that I'm sure everybody on the call realizes, that we have exponential growth going in technology, and there's nothing to arbitrate that which is moving toward what might serve the world and what might be really pathological. There is really no global arbiter of this runaway exponential growth in technology. So again, the need for those voices is also important. So pass it to Yanni and see what he wants to say.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of shift slightly, but still be in response to Connie's question. And that is that one of the things that we're partnering in is some festivals, music interspiritual festivals. There's going to be one in Ethiopia with thousands of people. Excuse me. And then the group that we're partnering with that's going to do it is going to do literally a bus tour throughout the United States. And the idea with this, and this is where I'm going to get to where this is practical, not just some event, is by combining music, we can attract a lot of different people, let's say millennials or folks who would want to come for an experience. And then in that festival, we would then also have major waking up and growing up kind of discussion groups and all kinds of stuff. And then prior to even doing these events, we will have gone to each of these places that we're doing them, create an infrastructure where then people who are inspired by the vision can then find practical ways through which they can express this vision on a local level. So we're working on, these kinds of organizational and systemic things where we can help people figure out where they can plug in, not just into the vision, the internal vision, but also an external way of getting involved and contributing in whatever way that they can.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's interesting how that bubbled up. This is actually a group we're partnering with in Australia, which themselves is both an interfaith, interspiritual group and made up of people who are very successful business people. And they simply have seen, just as you were saying, Steve, that these things are on the map together now, and they're younger, they are people of resources, and they've said, we want to take this vision to that experiential level where we can talk about this in the midst of music and dance and, spiritual practice. And so that's on the drawing board. You can actually take a look at the Australians' website. It's onegod.com, which is the numeral 1, onegod.com. And I just find it refreshing because they came out of nowhere. At least, in other words, they had done a lot in Australia, but I didn't know of them. They connected to other partners of ours in this trans-narrative or narrative pluralism discussion and flew over to Atlanta to sit down with us. And now, actually, when Yanni leaves tomorrow, he'll be meeting them to host them at the UN to start meeting people at the UN. And they're probably going to do a program in October at the UN that kind of announces the vision that Yanni was just talking about. So a lot of things are hot.
Fantastic. Let's. There's another. We have time for one more question. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes here before I'm going to share coming programs. This is a question about the political field. It says, were there any discussions on how to affect and shift the political field? There certainly were in Boulder, but Kurt, do you want to talk about that first?
Well, I'll give a real brief answer since we're short on time. Yes. In the international discussion, what we understand, particularly after the Rio Plus 20 meeting, is that governments and business that are on this other paradigm can actually stall out this forward movement. So what we realize is that it's the shift in civil will, like 20,000 people on this call right now. It's civil will that creates the political will to then push the structures toward the actual changes, in policy. So that's the type of momentum that we're trying to really be realistic about, and just also to say that there's a moniker in our circles of make your circle of dialogue a circle of influence, and make your circle of influence a system of influence. So if all of us can look at our local and regional work as that, going from the dialogue to the influence to the system of influence, and pushing this thing, upward toward the civil will, propelling the political will toward actual change. This is probably the most only realistic way to go, given the systems that are in place right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, and so that's a wonderful way to lay that out. It extends the invitation to everybody, doesn't it, Kurt?
Absolutely, yeah. We very often say to somebody when they say, "What should we do?" We say, "Look, create something, and don't just create it, connect it." And then the network becomes bigger and more powerful.
And launch it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's time for us all to step into our activism, all come down on the field and participate. Steve McIntosh was part of this group that met on Sunday, and he did talk about the political activism he's involved in. He and his partners recently got something funded called the Institute for Cultural Evolution. If you go to stevemcintosh.com, and click on the, let's see, what is it here at the top? Click on the think tank. You'll be able to read about it. It's called the Institute for Cultural Evolution. I'll read you something here about it. He talked a little bit about this during the meeting. He's the president and co-founder of this nonprofit integral political think tank, the Institute for Cultural Evolution. It's applying insights from integral philosophy, developmental psychology, evolutionary theory, and the social sciences to help create significant forward movement in the evolution of the American political landscape. Neither left nor right nor centrist, ICE focuses on problems created by America's culture war, where deep and often unrecognized forces shape the hearts and minds of the electorate. So it's fascinating. We're bringing integral wisdom here to the American political landscape. They're focusing their efforts on the United States. So you might want to check that out.
Absolutely. And Stephen Dinan's new book, Awakened America, Awakened World, and Stephen Dinan, the founder of Shift Network, the same thing. He's actually going to be attending both the Democratic Convention and the Republican Convention with major, groups that are voicing this forward movement. Because I think everybody also knows globally there's a general feeling that America has to succeed at this so the world can succeed at this, because supposedly we're an open society and supposedly we're a democracy. So we really have to be a model that shows how the civil will can push the political will toward real change. So Steve Dinan as well, his new book.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that in, Stephen Dinan. Yes, this is a key focus of his. John Steiner and others have all come together also to focus on this, and doing great work. Okay, well, let me... Kurt,
and it's a small world. John and Margot are really good friends of ours.
Yes, they are. What website can people go to, Kurt and Yanni, to follow your work?
Interspirituality.com for all of Interspirituality. TheComingInterspiritualAge.com for the larger vision of Interspirituality. Forum21.co for what this looks like globally and at the UN. And then selfcaretoearthcare.com for how it looks when you lay it out as programs and vision, especially for the environment.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. And Yanni, is there a site people can go to follow your work?
Or would
it be the same site?
I have my own personal site, but this is more important, this other stuff. That's fine with mailing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, be sure to check out those websites. We'll be staying in touch, close touch with Kurt and Yanni, doing such great work, bringing people together around important topics. So I want to thank you both, Kurt Johnson and Yanni Maniatis. Thank you so much for being here. Just an awesome, wisdom-filled hour, and I appreciate it so much. We've got warm comments here from others also. Not done thanking you. I'll come back and thank you some more, but let me just share a few announcements. First, I did reference during our conversation of this Conscious Business Declaration.org website, Humanities Team, the Club of Budapest, the Goy Peace Foundation, and the Fowler Center for Business out of Case Western University did create this Conscious Business Declaration. It defines a whole new standard for business in the 21st century. It shares we must move beyond profit as the exclusive focus to profit that comes from nurturing humanity and life on the planet. And again, you can go to consciousbussinessdeclaration.org to read about it. If you resonate with that work, we invite you to sign the declaration and even become an ambassador for it and for businesses that are generators of good things in your community. We have some upcoming programs that I don't want you to miss. Be sure to join us next week on Wednesday, June 22nd. I'll be interviewing Jean Houston. She's always such an incredible guest. We'll be talking about a topic, electing yourself, how we can deepen our personal responsibility for ourselves and the world around us without giving away our power. So that's going to be a fantastic interview. I invite you to join us. That's Wednesday the 22nd. Usually our programs are on Thursdays. This time it's on Wednesday. Also, usually the programs are in the morning. This time it's in the afternoon. It's at 1 o'clock Pacific time. That's Los Angeles time. If you go to livinginone.com, you can read about all of our upcoming programs. You can register for those programs, including the one with Jean next week. And if you missed the live program, we do send out a little thank you note with the link to the program for 48 hours free listening. So that's at livinginone.com. Almost all of our programs are free here in Humanities Team, and most of our staff is still volunteer. So if you resonate with our work around awakening oneness in ourselves and the world, and then the social activism that we launch from these various programs, then we invite you to go to humanitiesteam.org. You can learn more about us, and you can also financially contribute to our work. Our program has focused on living in oneness, so I want to also invite you to be part of something Humanities Team created last year. It's called Community Circle, and it's only $10 a month. It's for those who wish to be part of an intentional community committed to living and embodying oneness, those who want to collaborate and connect with leaders engaged in spiritual activism, a community that gives